years ago in Beijing at the UN Conference on Women, I was very honored to be there representing our country and to speak about what needed to change for women to have greater rights, greater opportunities to be full participants in their societies. And I was struck by how committed the global community was. 30 years seems like forever ago, but it's just a blink of an eye. And that commitment was demonstrated by the acceptance of something called the Platform for Action. Ginsburg, made her reputation on striking down laws that were unfair to men and women in trying to achieve equal rights under the law. So I think it's fair to say in the report that we issued, I teach at Columbia University at the School of International and Public Affairs and helped to found something called the Institute of Global Politics, and in partnership with global women leaders, issued this report that Holly mentioned, talking about the progress, but also recognizing it's stalled, and in some places it's going backwards. So progress to me is really measuring ourselves against what was, in my view, the most historic document in the history of how women are treated by the law and by custom that has ever been produced in the history, literally, of the world. And that document served as our North Star. What did we need to do? So in the report, we point out that progress stalled, in many ways because of COVID. COVID was such a shock to the system. We were talking backstage about ways, but because of COVID, with the shutdown of economies, with the tension in a lot of households, domestic violence went up all over the world. People who had been persuaded not to sell their daughters into early marriage felt they had no choice because there was no income, there were no markets open, so child bride numbers went up. Wow. Things began to unravel, and now, of course, we have leaders in a number of countries that are determined to turn the clock back. So we have to hold the line, and we have to regroup, and then we have to get back to trying to deal with the embedded structural inequalities and also the attitudes that too many people still have. And I will finally add, what has happened online has made it all much more difficult. The level of harassment and attacks against women, and not just women that you read about in the paper, but women who are in school who are being bullied online. Women in businesses who are trying to demonstrate their worth are being critiqued and attacked online. Entertainers, everybody, anybody, anyone who puts their head up. So we have a new problem we didn't have 30 years ago, and that is the role that online media is playing in perpetuating misogyny and, frankly, really putting it on a faster track than it ever has been before because of the reach of social media. Back several years and see what was happening in Russia under Putin. Laws were being changed, for example, domestic violence laws, which we had worked really hard with women advocates inside Russia to actually get passed in their Duma, were being reversed. So domestic violence was no longer viewed as the crime that it should be. In Turkey, a country that I was in 25 years ago in Istanbul to support the International Convention Against Trafficking, which included provisions about abuse and mistreatment of women. Turkey withdrew. Xi Jinping in China said that women should be back in the home, and that is in part because they have a population imbalance and a serious potential threat in the future to having too few young people. So this is something that we see happening in many different settings, but usually tied to authoritarian leadership. We saw it with Orban in Hungary, and of course we have seen it with Trump in the United States. The very first person that Trump fired when he became president was the woman commandant of the Coast Guard. The second person he fired was the black Air Force general, who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. The third person he fired was the woman admiral that was the chief of naval operations, and so it has gone. They have driven women and African American men and women out of public positions. They do it in the name of ending diversity, equity, and inclusion. Which is, in my view, a rationale that doesn't hold water, because I called the woman admiral who had been in the Navy for 40 years and had been promoted to be chief of naval operations during Biden's term. She had commanded a carrier group, about the most important, willing to take them on. And that's a terrifying prospect for a lot of people. People are afraid of retaliation. They're afraid of being scapegoated, having fingers pointed at them, losing business if they're in the business world, losing a job if they are speaking from their position about what's happening. So we are in a lot of turmoil, and trying to sort it out is going to be one of the major challenges in our political system in the next year or two. Now, no, you have to be very focused on moving your entire organization forward in order to be successful in achieving what your objectives are, what your ultimate goals are. And, you know, from my perspective, it's become too easy to be a politician or a leader who is judged on performance as opposed to production. I used to think what mattered was what you produced. You know, did you get it done? Did you get the legislation passed? Did you meet the market targets if you're in the corporate sector? Did you achieve the goal that you had set? Now, people get away with acting as though they did, whether they did or not. True. And it is always, that's always been part of human nature. You know, who can get there first and claim it.
Makes getting genuine progress harder, though, doesn't it?
It does. It makes progress much harder because we are not as sure as we should be about what's real and what isn't. So when you say, I want to bring health care to every child in America, which was one of my goals and what I worked on when I was First Lady, I thought the way you judged that was by measuring whether children got access to health care, whether disease went down, whether children were healthier at the end than when you started. Now, a leader can say, we're providing health care to everybody, and then flood social media with that lie and get credit for it. This, to me, is one of our biggest problems in leadership, but more than that, in any kind of reality-based action. Because what has happened with the virtual world is that you are judged by how entertaining you are, how big a reach you have, how outrageous you might want to be, as opposed to what did you do today? And did you achieve even the goals you set for yourself?
How do we fight against
all caps? I don't know who does it for him. I think he does some of it himself. But he writes in all caps, and he attacks people. It's like 3, 4, 5 times a day. You know, Hillary Clinton, such a liar, saying I did this. You know, okay. And, you know, people who knew what he was saying wasn't true, you know, they would give a press conference, they would put out a press release, they would tweet. I cannot call it X, they would tweet. But Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, has decided very smartly to just try to beat him at, or at least match him, if not beat him at his own game. So all of a sudden Gavin starts doing big cap, Donald Trump, can't be trusted. I mean, when you think about it, it's kind of sad. But we are living at a time where if you don't compete in the arena where people are paying attention, they're not reading your white paper.
It's true.
They may not catch your press conference. They may not read your annual report, but they'll see you on TikTok.
Yeah.
And I have babysitters and nannies sign contracts where they limit screen time for their own kids. But they inflict it on everybody else's children and don't care what the consequences are. So thank you, Australia, for taking them on. Stick with it and beat them back from doing what they are doing in every other part of the world. You know, don't let them do it to your kids. I don't think anyone would ever say Margaret Thatcher appeared vulnerable.
No.
Angela Merkel showed her vulnerability. I mean, it was not, Golda Meir, Indira Gandhi. I mean, it was not at all in even the mindset of anybody who was in politics, in government during those years. I mean, part of what you were judged on was, could you handle it?
Could you be tough enough?
Could you be tough enough? You know, were you going to go cry if, somebody said something mean to you? I mean, so you had to be literally on guard all the time. Now, I think that if you look at Julia Gillard or Jacinda Ardern, they tried to mix vulnerability with toughness. And it's fascinating to try to see what works and doesn't work. And, we're all vulnerable. I mean, just because you don't show it doesn't mean you aren't. But just because you show it doesn't mean you are. It could be another performance. How do you perform vulnerability? I mean, this is a very, complicated tightrope to walk. And I think that if you look at how do people have to be willing to stand against that too. So you just have to be on your toes, maybe 24/7, to figure out how best to be who you are, do what you want to do, and then communicate it. It was, the biggest influence on me. I'll give my father credit as well. My poor father did not know what to do with me. So he just said, when you work hard. When you play hard, and don't confuse the two. That was his, message. But my mother had a really, really difficult life. So she had so many problems, challenges, really dreadful situations in her childhood. And I didn't know that when I was a little girl, but as I got older, and I learned more about, being abandoned by her mother, being sent to live with, a very unpleasant, mean grandmother, being thrown out of that house when she was 13. I mean, just all kinds of stuff, having to go to work when she was 13, and on and on. So it came to me that, wow, I mean, she was a great mother, but she was kind, she cared about other people, she wanted to help people, she wanted me to grow up to learn how to help people. And when I was older and would talk to her about it, she said two things that have always stuck with me. She said, number one, kindness saved her. Not from her own family, which was very unkind, but from a first grade teacher who saw she never had any food. And back in those days, literally in the 1920s, there was no cafeteria. They would eat at their desks, and other children would bring food, and my mother never had any food. And her first grade teacher, one day, after about a week of this, said, "Oh, Dorothy," that was her name. She said, "Dorothy, I brought too much to eat. Would you like it?" And never in any way embarrassing her, never pointing it out, but just bringing an extra sandwich, bringing an extra carton of milk. Or when she was thrown out of her grandmother's house, she was hired by a woman to care for that woman's children. And like I say, she was 13. And to make decisions, understanding we all make mistakes, and not being so harsh on somebody who makes a mistake, but instead, what can you learn from it? And I still have people working for me who worked for me 30, 35 years ago, because we've grown together. And they're now leading. They're now doing things that they never thought they could do in the past. But I also want to underscore what you and I were talking about backstage. You know, kind of building on what I said about my mother, I mean, life is hard, you know? Things happen, and you have to be able to get up every day and forge ahead. And that does take resilience, but it also takes being able to do hard things and being conscientious about your work. You know, if it comes to you too easily, then, you know, it's probably not going to stick with you. And what we've seen in the last 10, 12 years with kids and screens and social media is that they don't have the stick-to-itiveness. They don't have the conscientiousness, and that's being measured. That's not just me as a grandmother saying that. That's, you know, how do you build resilience if you can't stick to something? So how do you even know what being resilient means? And this, you know, Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development that Holly mentioned, which surveys all the advanced economies like Australia and the United States and so many others, is finding that, you know, kids' attention spans are dropping, their ability to stick to hard tasks. You know, they are being addicted and therefore trained to respond to stimulus that comes in 10, 15, 20-second snippets. Now, one of the things that we're doing in the United States, and I don't even know if it's a problem here, but, you know, our educational testing scores have been steadily decreasing, and it wasn't just because of COVID. But my main, you know, effort is to tell the students examples that illustrate some of these points. So it's a huge class. It's 400 students, about a quarter of them undergraduates, 3/4 graduate students from all over the world. And so it's a 90-minute class. We teach for 70 minutes and then we answer questions. And the questions are brilliant and, you know, sometimes totally out of left field. You never thought about what, you know, the student was asking. It was to say that inside the situation room, especially in times of crisis decision making, a leader needs to have some awareness of what you're bringing to the discussion. And I'll give you an example. We now know from psychology that we all carry a lot of biases. We are biased for information that confirms what we already think. It's called confirmation bias. We are more likely to take risks if we think we are losing something than if we think we are gaining something, which I think explains a lot of what's happening with Putin. You know, 1 million Russian soldiers killed and injured. He's determined to, you know, destroy Ukraine as an independent democracy because the loss of the Soviet Union and the Russian Empire and sort of his mentality as the czar of the 21st century, it's just an insult that he can't tolerate. And so he keeps adding risk after risk. We talk about, you know, knowing yourself or knowing the person with whom you are negotiating well enough to be able to read them, to have an understanding of what motivates them. Why are they in this position? Why are they threatening you? Why are they refusing to follow through on an agreement? What's going on in their country, their politics, their society, and inside their head? And it's not just for people who end up in a situation.
What would you love them to take away?
That I think this is a moment to really evaluate what it means for you to be a leader, and to look for examples and models, mentors, learn what you should and should not do in whatever your professional public capacity might be. But I also think it's a time for citizens to lead. And here in Australia, it is really important what you do during this period, what decisions you make, what your political leaders' decisions are, what your decisions as citizens. And because you have compulsory voting, everybody has, you know, a stake in trying to determine the future of this country because, you know, we need good examples. We are going through a rough patch in the United States. And we need good examples of what leadership and citizenship look like. And everyone in this room has an opportunity to do both. To set that example as a leader and a citizen, and to stand up against the quick and easy hits that come, because of the internet and everything we've talked about, and to really stand against authoritarian tendencies. People who think that they can get away with ordering other people around, not being respectful, not listening. And I think that every day we can do something.